They shot her and left her for dead in a shallow grave beside her husband. They thought they had silenced the only witnesses. But they made one fatal mistake: they didn't know she was a soldier. The road trip was meant to be a reset. For Clara, the crisp mountain air of the Pacific Northwest was a world away from the dust and tension of her past life. Beside her, Liam tapped a rhythm on the steering wheel, his easy smile a constant source of light. They were chasing the last embers of summer, a final, blissful escape before settling into the quiet rhythm of civilian life. The first sign of trouble was a monster of a pickup truck, rusted and roaring, that tailgated them for miles before aggressively swerving past. The driver, a hulking man with a greasy ponytail and a predatory grin, laid on the horn and gave them the finger. Liam just shook his head. "Someone's in a hurry to get nowhere," he chuckled, but Clara felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. It was a feeling she'd been trained to recognize, the subtle shift in atmosphere that precedes violence. An hour later, they pulled into the gravel lot of a roadside diner, its neon sign flickering like a dying heartbeat. The same pickup truck was parked outside. As Liam went inside, Clara stretched her legs, the setting sun casting long, distorted shadows. That's when the driver, Cade, emerged from the diner. He swaggered toward her, his eyes crawling over her with an unnerving familiarity. "Well, look what we have here," he drawled, his voice thick with menace. "Lost, little thing." Before Clara could respond, the diner's screen door creaked open. An elderly woman with kind, crinkled eyes and a halo of white hair shuffled out, wiping her hands on her apron. "Cade, you leave our guests alone," she chided gently, her voice surprisingly firm. She turned to Clara, her expression softening into a grandmotherly smile. "You'll have to forgive my boy. He's got more muscle than manners." She introduced herself as Matilda. Her disarming warmth almost worked. As Liam returned, Matilda insisted on giving them a slice of her famous apple pie on the house, apologizing again for Cade's behavior. The encounter left Clara unsettled, but Liam, ever the optimist, saw it as a quaint local quirk. They drove on, deeper into the forest that swallowed the highway. Just as dusk began to bleed through the canopy, the flashing lights of a patrol car appeared behind them. A female officer, her face etched with a practiced, friendly concern, advised them against camping in the area. "Locals can be territorial," she warned, suggesting they find a motel back in town. Thanking her, they watched her drive off, the red and blue lights dissolving into the gloom. "Guess we're not welcome," Liam sighed. Then, as if on cue, the heavens opened up, a torrential downpour that turned the road to a river. Through the sheets of rain, a light flickered in the distance. A cabin. It seemed like a miracle, a dry, safe haven. The door was unlocked. Inside, a fire was already laid in the hearth, a pile of dry wood beside it. It was too perfect. While Liam, relieved, worked to start the fire, Clara's training took over. A quick, systematic search led her to a loose floorboard in the back room. She lifted it. Her blood ran cold. Neatly arranged in the dark space below was a cache of military-grade ammunition, zip ties, and duct tape. This wasn't a shelter. It was a hunting blind. "Liam, we have to go. Now." The urgency in her voice cut through the cozy crackle of the newly lit fire. Liam's smile faltered as he saw the look on her face, a look he hadn't seen since she'd left the service. It was the calm, focused mask of a soldier in enemy territory. But it was too late. The cabin door, which had swung open so invitingly, was kicked in with explosive force. Cade stood silhouetted against the stormy darkness, flanked by two other men. The last thing Clara saw before the world went black was the butt of a rifle swinging toward her head. She awoke to the scent of damp earth and stale blood. Her hands were bound tight with zip ties, her head throbbing in agony. They were in a crude, concrete basement. Liam was tied to a chair opposite her, his face bruised and swollen. Standing over him was Matilda. The kindly grandmother persona had vanished, replaced by an aura of absolute, chilling authority. She was the queen in this subterranean kingdom, and these were her feral sons. What followed was a ritual of cruelty. It wasn't just a beating, it was a systematic dismantling of a man's spirit. Matilda directed the violence with quiet, single-word commands, a conductor orchestrating a symphony of pain. Cade and his brothers took turns, their grunts and laughter echoing in the small space. They wanted something, information, but their true goal was dominance. They forced Clara to watch every blow, every moment of Liam's suffering, their eyes constantly flicking to her, feeding on her horror. The breaking point came when one of the men, searching Liam's wallet for cash, found his police badge. He held it up. "Matilda, he's a cop." The air in the room changed. The cruel game was over. Now, it was a matter of survival, theirs, not Liam's. Panic flashed in Cade's eyes. Matilda, however, remained unnervingly calm. She walked over to Liam, her expression almost one of pity. "A police officer," she said softly, tracing the line of his jaw with a finger. "That complicates things. We can't have loose ends." She pulled a pistol from the waistband of her jeans. She looked from Liam to Clara, a flicker of what might have been regret in her eyes. "I truly am sorry for this." She didn't hesitate. The first shot was deafening, and Liam's body slumped forward. A strangled cry escaped Clara's lips, a sound of pure, animal grief. Then, Matilda turned the gun on her. The second shot threw her backward, a searing, white-hot pain exploding in her side. Through a haze of shock, she felt herself being dragged, the rough concrete scraping her skin. Then, nothing but the suffocating weight of cold, wet earth as she and Liam were unceremoniously dumped into a pre-dug grave. The last sound she heard was the shovels, rhythmically piling dirt on top of them, burying their secrets in the dark. Silence. Darkness. The crushing weight of the world. Death was supposed to be quiet, but all Clara could hear was the frantic thunder of her own heart. She was alive. The bullet had torn through her side, a messy, agonizing wound, but it had missed anything vital. Survival instinct, honed by years of relentless training, screamed at her to move. Pain was a signal, not a stop sign. With agonizing slowness, she pushed, clawed, and writhed her way through the loose, freshly turned soil, gasping as her head finally broke the surface into the cold, rain-soaked night. She was reborn from her own grave. She crawled to Liam. His body was still, his warmth gone. The finality of it hit her with the force of a physical blow, a grief so vast it threatened to swallow her whole. She lay her head on his chest, her silent sobs shaking her entire frame. This was her fault. Her choice of route, her hesitation. In that moment of absolute despair, a memory surfaced, sharp and clear as a shard of glass. She was back in the hellish humidity of North Carolina, face down in the mud, instructors screaming in her ear. SEER school. Survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. They'd broken her down, starved her, hunted her, and simulated capture to build her back up into something unbreakable. They taught her that pain was a resource, fear was a compass, and hope was a discipline. They taught her how to turn the wilderness into a weapon and her mind into a fortress. The memory was a catalyst. The tears stopped. The grief, still there, was packed away, compressed into a diamond-hard core of pure, cold rage. She was no longer Clara, the grieving wife. She was Specialist Miller, call sign Phoenix, an expert in unconventional warfare. And she was on enemy soil. She gently closed Liam's eyes and covered his body with ferns and branches, a makeshift burial shroud in the heart of the forest. It was a promise. They would pay. All of them. She took stock. A gunshot wound, severe blood loss, no weapon, no gear. To anyone else, it was a death sentence. To her, it was a starting point. She tore a strip from her shirt, packing the wound tightly to staunch the bleeding. Her eyes scanned the forest floor, not for a way out, but for resources. A sturdy branch became a walking staff and a potential club. A sharp-edged rock became a cutting tool. She was a ghost, risen from the earth with a singular purpose. The hunt had begun. But this time, she was the hunter. The forest that had been their prison was now Clara's cathedral of vengeance. Every shadow was an ally, every sound a signal. She moved through the dense undergrowth with a silence that was supernatural, her senses dialed to an impossible acuity. Her first target was one of the men who had held her down. She observed him for an hour from a ridge, learning his routine as he patrolled the perimeter of Matilda's sprawling farm. He was sloppy, overconfident. She crafted a simple tripwire from vines, connected to a heavy, dead branch suspended overhead. When he passed, she released the tension. The branch swung down with brutal efficiency, a pendulum of justice that snapped his neck instantly. She didn't feel triumph, only a grim satisfaction. One down. Panic began to ripple through Matilda's ranks. A man doesn't just disappear. Cade, enraged and spooked, sent out search parties. This played directly into Clara's hands. A divided force was a weak force. She used their own tactics against them, creating diversions, a rustle in the bushes here, a snapped twig there, to funnel them into kill zones of her own design. A sharpened stake in a concealed pit claimed another. The forest was bleeding them dry, one by one, and the fear was palpable. Back at the farmhouse, Matilda was not idle. Her network ran deep in the corrupt little town. She made a call, pulling a file on the couple they had tried to erase. When the report came back, the blood drained from her face. Clara Miller. Former U.S. Army Special Forces. Elite SEER training. Multiple combat deployments. The profile read less like a tourist and more like a government-sanctioned assassin. The kindly grandmother mask slipped, revealing the terrified matriarch beneath. She wasn't fighting a victim, she was fighting a professional. The escalation came when Clara found their fuel depot, a hidden shed packed with barrels of gasoline for their illicit operations. She rigged a simple but effective incendiary device using a piece of glass to focus the morning sun onto a pile of oil-soaked rags. The resulting explosion was immense, a fireball that lit up the sky and sent a shockwave through the valley. The blast caught the attention of Sheriff Miller, the one man in town Matilda couldn't buy. A decent, old-school lawman on the verge of retirement, he had long suspected the rot at the heart of his community. The explosion was the undeniable proof he needed. As Miller's patrol car headed toward the smoke, Matilda, now in a full-blown panic, knew she had lost control. Her empire was being dismantled from the outside by an enemy she couldn't see and from the inside by a fear she couldn't contain. The reckoning was at hand. With the outer defenses in chaos, Clara moved inward. Her target was Cade. She found him not in the main house, but in a secluded barn, overseeing a different kind of horror. Inside, locked in squalid stalls like animals, were a dozen young women, their eyes hollow with despair. They were Matilda's other business. Cade was there, barking orders, his face flushed with power. Clara, hidden in the rafters, watched and waited. When he was alone, she dropped down behind him, a silent specter of death. He didn't even have time to scream. She left his body for the others to find, a clear message that the inner sanctum had been breached. Her mission shifted. Revenge was secondary now, rescue was paramount. She moved to the stalls, her voice a low, calming whisper. "I'm going to get you out of here." The girls were terrified, but in one pair of eyes, she saw a flicker of fight. Her name was Leah, and she was pregnant. As Clara worked on the locks, Leah provided crucial information about the guards' routines. They made their move under the cover of the ensuing chaos. They slipped out of the barn and into the tree lean, the sounds of shouting and alarm bells fading behind them. For a moment, it felt like freedom. They ran for what felt like hours until the familiar red and blue lights cut through the trees. It was the same female officer who had warned them before. Relief washed over Leah, but Clara's internal alarms were screaming. The officer's smile was too wide, her calm too practiced. "You girls are safe now," she said, ushering them into the back of her patrol car. "Let's get you somewhere secure." Leah fell asleep almost instantly, exhausted and emotionally drained. Clara stayed awake, watching the officer's eyes in the rearview mirror. The sanctuary was a secluded fishing lodge, miles from anywhere. It was quiet, clean, and utterly terrifying. As the officer led them inside, the trap snapped shut. The front door opened, and Matilda walked in, her face a mask of cold fury. Behind her stood the last of her men. The policewoman just shrugged, a look of casual betrayal on her face. "Sorry, girls. Matriarch's orders." Hope, which had been a tiny, flickering flame, was extinguished in an instant. They had been led from one cage directly into another, more secure one. The betrayal was more devastating than any physical blow. It was a masterstroke of psychological warfare, and Clara knew, with chilling certainty, that this was Matilda's endgame. In the new prison, Matilda's cruelty took on a sharper edge. She focused on Leah, using the girl's pregnancy as a psychological weapon against Clara. But she underestimated her opponent. Clara wasn't just a soldier, she was an escape artist. While feigning despair, she was observing, planning. She used a loose thread from her jeans to work on her restraints, her movements so subtle they were invisible. She noted the guards' complacency, their arrogance. The opportunity came during a shift change. In the few seconds of inattention, she freed herself, moving with blinding speed. She dispatched the two guards with brutal, close-quarters efficiency, using their own weapons against them. She freed Leah, her eyes burning with a cold fire. "It ends now." They moved toward the main room, where Matilda and her remaining men were gathered. The final battle was not a firefight, it was a slaughter. Clara moved through the room like a force of nature, a whirlwind of calculated violence. Men twice her size fell before they could even raise their guns. The room became a charnel house in under a minute. In the chaos, a terrified Matilda grabbed Leah, holding a hunting knife to the pregnant girl's throat. "Stop! Or she dies," she shrieked, her voice cracking. Clara froze. In that split second of hesitation, one last surviving thug lunged at her from behind. As Clara turned to neutralize him, Matilda panicked. With a desperate sob, she slashed the knife across Leah's throat. A profound silence fell over the room, broken only by the gurgling sound of Leah's last breath. Clara finished her attacker and rushed to the girl's side, but it was too late. The light had already faded from her eyes. Something inside Clara broke. The cold, disciplined soldier vanished, replaced by pure, undiluted rage. She turned to Matilda, who was scrambling for a weapon, her face a mess of tears and terror. The final confrontation was swift and merciless. Clara didn't just kill her, she dismantled her, ending the reign of the matriarch of this poisoned family tree. 3 months later, the news reports called it a gangland war. They spoke of the fall of a criminal empire that had strangled the small town for decades. The captive women were freed, the corrupt police officer was exposed, and Sheriff Miller became a local hero for cracking the case. The town began to breathe again. Of the mysterious woman who had started it all, there was no trace. She had vanished as completely as she had appeared. Miles away, in a quiet coastal town, a woman with haunted eyes stared out at the ocean, the waves washing away the blood, but not the memories. Her war was over. Her revenge was complete. But the echoes of the forest would remain forever. What do you think of Clara's journey? Was her revenge justified? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and please be respectful of all opinions. If you found this story compelling, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who needs to see that even in the darkest of graves, a phoenix can rise.